Today we're looking at grading optimization, and we're just gonna poke around in a little bit and show it off here. And I've actually been running into this quite a bit as of late, where folks are starting to explore it a bit more, and I assume a lot of you are probably doing the same thing. And it's been kind of a neat tool, and we're going to be looking at Autodesk commission study. They basically they came in, took a look at, or they actually hired some folks out to go in and look at 5 different processes. We'll get into all that, and basically just figured out what it would, percentage wise, and what it would take to, or what you're saving in time utilizing this tool. So kind of jumping ahead here a little bit. So our agenda today. So we'll do some brief introductions and that. I've been doing this so doggone long, I probably have met most of you already, but we'll do some brief introductions, just kind of talk about what we're doing here. And then, like I said, we're going to peek at that Autodesk commission study, look at some of the processes that they did, and I'll probably backtrack a little bit too. I do a ton of consulting, especially with grading, and it's a wonderful tool. I have, for those of you that I've worked with or been in classes with or whatever it may be, I'm always saying this is one of my favorite parts of the program. So I'm guilty of that. I guess I have a couple of them. There's no necessarily 1, 2, 3, but this is definitely up in the top 3 for sure. And grading is one of those tools where, as you get into it, more people I run into talk to me about this particular part of the program than any other the different components or different aspects of the program. It's one of those tools where you can visualize something, think of how you're going to put it together, and then you got to fight the beast there, and make sure there's no crossing break lines, this, that, and the other, and hopefully you come up with something that's pretty nice at the end of it. I always feel, even though we have to be incredibly accurate at what we're designing and whatnot, but I always felt like there's just a little element of sort of artistic impression that we get to infuse in when we're utilizing grading. So just throwing that out there. But like I said, I've been doing a lot of consulting with it, and in fact, I've even been across the country doing it. And it seems like it's always kind of the same thing, where we're running into little scenarios where maybe it's a smaller site, there's some tight grading that needs to take place, and how we go in and we start stacking different drawings here and there. And or not stacking drawings, sorry, but stacking this line work, and then things are coming out okay or fairly well anyway. And then as you get into the more the interior of the grading and more fun, like granular or finite grading, it ends up one part of it's trying to overlap the other, and we're really struggling with that. And there's a lot of good tools in place that we can do that. Or just different little aspects or angles to utilize the existing tools that are in the program. But the one thing that's kind of slick about this optimization tool is it actually lets us go in. We can go in. We can apply these different zones throughout our site, and then we can give different importance through hierarchy. And once it's set up, basically we say optimize. And then it's going to try to do its best to listen to what we've said, right? And it's going to go in there and say, okay, well, this building pad's doing this, and there's some break lines over here. There might be a sidewalk and a parking lot, even a pond, whatever it may be. And again, due to hierarchy, we'll peek at that later. It's going to go through that whole process, run iterations on it, and then come back and say, what do you think of this? And then we can either accept that and project that back into our drawing, or we go in, change some things, maybe change some constraints here and there, and then run it again. So it's really helped on some of those internal places. Now, I'll be honest, I've ran into really complex surfaces that I've tried to run the tool on. And like anything, it's doing its best to perform the calculations and whatnot, but you're never sure, until it comes back to us and we take a look at it, and then we have to go back through that process, possibly change some of the zone hierarchy around, or add tighter constraints or whatever it may be to arrive at something. So Now, I would say this: if this tool is a fantastic tool, but if if you know exactly what you're looking for right up front, give it a go. But this may not be the exact, tool that we're looking for. The idea of this is to jumpstart us tremendously and get us much further along, with the overall site, overall grade and everything else as it goes. So, a very, very slick tool. Now, going a little further here, looking at the actual documentation, and I believe this is you guys have this. I'm not sure. If not, ping us. We can make sure we can send these this study over to you, and we can look at what I just want to kind of briefly go through it a little bit and peek at some of the different components within it and some of their findings. So here's that study, and this is kind of the beginning of it, right? This is sort of the layout of what was done. And again, as you can see, this was supposedly an unbiased study, and the main thing with this is they did it in 5 different areas. Sort of the mass site grading area, as you can see there. Then they did a building pad and parking area, retaining walls, pond creation and storage volume adjustments, and then the overall project grading comparison. All right. And this is document 1. It's kind of explaining the entire thing. Now, jumping over the other one here, this kind of breaks it down. This is the kind of the summary. And what I thought we might do is not spend too much time on it, because I know you guys can read this. But one of the key elements in this, right, right there at the top there, that 74%. This is the overall production gains once it looked at each one of these 5 different areas, and and this is the average of them all. Okay, now that's incredibly impressive. But we have these internal conversations here when we're talking to clients, and sometimes that might be perfect surface or whatever it may be to get that 74%. And maybe not, I don't want to downplay that. It's a great number. But, a lot of times we'll think about it if I can save you, 15 minutes a week or, whatever that may be. And, you start looking at that every week for the entire year. And then, you start adding more users onto that. And that's a considerable savings. Time is money when it comes to this stuff. So, this would definitely be a tool. I would say, start playing with it. And if you have questions and whatnot, I'll make sure we have contact information here. You can get a hold of us, and we'll get you pointed in the right way or whatever that may be. All right. So, kind of looking at some of these things, I won't go through too much of the study here, but here's those 5 areas again, just that mass site, building pad, and retaining wall, et cetera, et cetera. But what I kind of thought was interesting is they compared standard tools, like how we've done the process in the past, and then they switch over to that using the optimization tools. Now, for those of you that haven't dabbled much into this, please note that the grading optimization tools are not like they're not. How should I say this? They're not taking over our standard or traditional tools. It's more of a, like I said, it's a jump start where we can put in a bunch of constraints across the board there, and then from there, once it we kick it out, it runs it, and then it shoots it back to us, and we like it, we may not like it, or we can find the errors that mathematically it possibly couldn't solve, whatever it may be. So I say that because all of those wonderful Civil 3D grading tools that we're all used to, those all still come into play. It's being kicked back to us, and now what we're doing is we're taking that information, and then we're going to use those tools on top of this. Okay. Now I don't know. It's sort of like I don't know. It's a silly analogy. Sort of like ordering, going and picking up a pizza at one of those like Papa Murphy's or something like that. It's set up, but we still have to take it home, doctor it, and cook it ourselves. So that interior grading is the key, and we'll still be using all of those tools. Now I'm going to pop open the program here in just a second. You got a couple of drawings I want to show off here. All right, so I just pulled up a different drawing. Yeah, I'm not quite showing it yet. We're still kind of looking at this. So just like looking at these processes here, this is for the mass site grading. And believe you me, and I know those that are watching also have these tools. Standard tools for these grading sites. It could be incredibly complicated. Looking at a couple of these, I'm not going to read them all to you here, but looking at a couple of high points. We have to go in. We have to assign elevations to each of the corners of these feature lines that we're creating. We're throwing in rough pads. Often we're making multiple surfaces at the same time to achieve this, and then creating composite surfaces at the end. Once it's in there, we're playing with all the editors, adjusting all the slopes. And again, I don't want to downplay that. And, we're still going to be doing that, but we're just starting from step 7 rather than step 1. And there's so much to do, building, adding, et cetera, all the edits that go along with it, making sure we don't have any crossing break lines and so forth. Well, I'll let you guys kind of poke through the optimization tool. In this one, where it differs is we go in, we're actually working with polylines. And we draw polylines within the drawing. We'll peek at that, and then we go in and we assign. Okay, this one, this polyline is going to be a building pad, and this is going to be the parking lot over here, and this is going to be a sidewalk, etc., curbs and so forth. And when you're doing that, we can go in and we can say, are these break lines? Are these or do they have a little bit of play in them? Is it a constraint or an objective? Is a kind of a key terminology that we'll look at here along the way. So once that's all assigned, we go in and we assign all that, and then we like it, or if in fact we like it, when we kick it back into our drawing, what it's going to do is turn all of those polylines at those newly created elevations and grades and so forth, and it's going to kick those into our drawing and turn them into actual feature lines themselves. Now, and I won't go through each one of these darn steps. There's a lot of them in here, right? But pulled up this drawing for fun here. Just a buddy of mine put this together. There it goes. Bring it over here for us to look at. So this is kind of what I was talking about. This is sort of that preliminary grade, and we're still going to do some of this by setting this up before we kick it out to the optimizer. But what I had to do with this one, this is a parking lot, right? And there's a loading dock here. There's a building. There's pads. There's the overall site grading, et cetera. There's existing roads, but these green lines here, those are actually feature lines. And it was a whole series of creating from starting with known elevations. I think we had in fact I know we did. We had the elevation of the building, so then we took that and we knew the length of the parking lot, so we would offset that at a distance of whatever it was. I can't remember what it was, 500 feet, something like that. I can't remember, and it was a negative 2%. And in this case, all of this was projecting downhill to the northwest sort of deal. And once we would get all of these in place, and it could be, a series of copies and going in and assigning things, et cetera, starting at this point, going to this point, and all this kind of stuff. And then from there, we would take that information. This is sort of that preliminary grading concept, and we would take that information, and we would basically, create a temporary surface, so to speak, and we would have our preliminary grades. Now, there's several different ways to do this, but this is just one of the methods. And once that was in place, then we would start going in and projecting like all of these different lines up to the surface, the parking, say the islands here and there, and whatever it may be, and then project all that information up, turn into feature lines, and then start manipulating the surface from there, keeping it on the same group sites, et cetera. So this, I've spent more time doing this. It can be a lot of work, and then at the end of it, we're also managing multiple surfaces to get this thing. There's always going to be somewhat of an element of that, with composite surfaces and whatnot, but nonetheless. So that's one of the aspects of it. Okay. All right. So looking at some of these other little pieces before we get too deep into this. Okay, let's see which one I want to show off. I thought actually, well, of course, grading tools for this is for a building pad and parking lot. We would go in, same thing. We would go in and have to, draw a feature line somewhere, elevate that feature line. Usually these would be actually hard elevations. Keep it simple here. Say it's a bit of some form of a rectangle or whatever the shape of your building is. Elevate that thing. Set it at a hard value. Build surfaces, check it, see if that's working, whatnot. Where again, switching this over into say the grading optimizer, where it differs a bit, it's just a polyline. It's going to project up. It's going to look at all these different tools at the same time, and or not tools but zones at the same time, and via hierarchy, it's going to say, okay, do this first, do this next one, try to achieve this first, and try to attack the next one if you could, and then it kind of goes on down that line. Now, in particular, I kind of like the next one here, which was just talking about and I've done a million of these, like retaining walls, and the standard process, I guess, with that is you would go in, you would create a feature line, at the top and at the bottom. You have to make sure it ties, of course, using stepped offset lines, and then possibly at the very top, up, down, project down to the surface, all these different kinds of things. And then you would add those lines to a surface. And then you would have all kinds of different little, editing scenarios that you may run into, or, and very common. And we'll still have to be doing some of that. But what I kind of liked about this one is you just draw a polyline at the location of the low end of the wall, and then draw a closed polyline existing grade extents. And then when you run this thing, it's going to take that, and you can give it right here, the minimum and maximum elevations of it. So that's where it's got a little bit of a fudge factor in there. So when we say, mathematically, we're telling the software to do a whole bunch of stuff at once. And as it's, running these different iterations, again, we can kind of give it they are constraints, but it's more of a parameters. Go in here and adjust this, and see if you can get this close, and then when this pops back to us, and we can review it, and like I said, if we like it, then we just project it into our actual Civil 3D drawing, and that'll actually be a surface. All the feature lines will come in, and all of the additional pieces along with it. Which one's this one? This is the pond creation. That one's actually pretty straightforward. I don't know. A lot of times, when I'm manipulating, you just put in as you go into it, you select your pond, and as you go into it, you just have to tell it, okay, this is what I'm, this is what my looking for, like certain elements that storage or whatever it may be in that pond, and it's just you just kind of fill out a checkbox here and say give it a go, and then finally the overall grading itself, which is the just a whole site in one. And it's, again, I didn't go through these two in depth because I know you guys can read them on your own, but the big thing I really wanted to maybe highlight on that is how much work goes into that. Now, again, I don't want to lie to you. If you do this and it may not come back as anticipated. If it doesn't, well, that's where you can go back into it, maybe make some changes, swap zones around, whatever. Say try to do the parking lot before you end up doing this building pad that's associated, or whatever it may be, and you'll quite possibly get better results, and then going in, we're going to start doing those, like I said, the more granular grading as we play with it. All right, so anyway, maybe popping open and drawing. Here's just one of the. I have a ton of them in here, but this is just one of them in particular that comes along with, I think you'll find this in some of the tutorials and whatnot. And as you start poking around this, you'll notice a lot of these are just. You can see that that's just a polyline. That's like the extents of the parking lot, and then there's there's different types of lines. We'll be reviewing that, and then there's sidewalks possibly, and then we have all these different curbs. There's actually a curb line that goes around this thing, and then we have like the overall extents, which is the grading extents. We have to also set that. Okay, and we'll kind of dig through some of these little pieces here and there. Now, going in to this, and there's a couple of interesting little pieces to this. So what we're looking at on the screen is you can see that there's a surface back there, and you can actually see the surface border back here. You know, that's often turned off when we go to our final plots and whatnot. But this in here, like I said, this is the extent of the grading. Now, I just wanted to throw a couple things out with this. When we do kick this information out, you know, we have it optimized, and when it comes back to us, when we import that information, it doesn't just take this piece here, it combines them, and it's going to actually bring the most exterior of the existing ground with it. So the whole thing's going to come back in, okay? And you have the ability to name it and you know, put it on, you know, stylize it, etc. But kind of playing with this thing here, there is some key pieces that we do have to have. So these are little required elements going into utilizing this optimization tool. You have to have an existing ground surface. That's you know, that's the number one thing right off the bat. If you don't have that, you know, because it's comparing that surface, obviously, for like volumes. I mean, that's the easy part. But it's also trying to figure out, like, you know, how can I cut this down or fill in specific areas to make sure that we end up having the entire, you know, site mathematically work. So that is one of the key pieces. Okay, and then. And then, just like I was mentioning as I was kind of looking at this drawing here, we also have to define a boundary of the grading limits. And that's what I'm looking at back here. That's this sort of, I'm not sure what kind of shape that is, but you can see that's the overall, okay? And then any additional line work, building pads, curbs, drain lines, all of that's going to go into that drawing as well. And when we do that, that's, you know, we're putting in those kinds of key lines, or is probably a good way of saying it. Those are going to be more of a constraint rather than an objective. They just have some different terminology in there. You'll see that some of the lines give you the ability, when you go into the properties of it, you can say, okay, this line is important, but it's not nearly as important as, say, a drain line. We're trying to keep something, obviously, if we have a, you know, something that's supposed to be, you know, a -1.5% going a key direction, we want that surface to treat that like a break line. That's a true constraint. But you could have some other lines that might have a little bit of fudge factor in there. And prime examples, we were talking about that a while ago with the like a retaining wall. Once we set that up, you know, you could say, okay, here's my minimum and maximum elevations that I want at the top of the wall, and it's going to still try to, you know, work with all those other elements as it goes, and then see if it can't, you know, resolve that that idea, or not idea, but that design. So when we go into this grading optimization tool, okay, and you do have to, you know, you got to install it. In fact, I believe it was just last week, maybe a bit longer. I had a gentleman call in, and they were struggling to actually get the tool itself. I think I went out to, I ended up having to download it for him and send it to him. This is, you just go to your account at Autodesk. I think it's, what is it, manage.autodesk.com, or maybe I got that backwards. But you go out there, you know, look for what you have, and you got to make sure you find the appropriate version and whatnot. And I believe they have all the service packs updated in those too. So if there was anything wrong with it, if you grab the latest and greatest, it'll backfill any service packs just in case. So I ended up downloading it for him. And what it does, because if you don't have it, and I ran into this with a class I was teaching too, on that home tab where we always do our work, you'll see that there's a button there, the grading optimization button, but that'll just pop up if I click on it, just for kicks here. You'll see that it pops up a thing and says, hey, check it out, this is a great tool. But to use that tool, obviously, I'll close this down. It's just kind of telling us about it. And, but to actually use that tool, this is very similar to, like, possibly calculating volumes or whatever it may be, or volumes or criteria, or creating criteria for, say, road work or whatever it is. It would be on that Analyze tab. We're looking at something, and you know, usually when you go to this Analyze tab, you know, more often than not, we're doing the volumes dashboard, or you know, possibly volume grading tools, etc. But as I slide all the way over to the far right here, mine's a little bit compressed down just because I'm on my laptop here, but you have some buttons up in the very upper right-hand corner. And that first button, if you just click on it, this is the kind of turns everything on here. And this is, when I move this out of the way here, when I select that, now we can turn them. There's two buttons just to the right of it. You can see that they're highlighted blue. You can independently turn them on and off and that kind of thing. But looking at this thing here, the first one here is our tool palette, and this is when you go into it. This is where we go in and assign these different elements, right? And you know, you go through your drawing and pick, okay, here's the extents and here's the curbs and so forth. And then it ends up populating our drawing, or I guess the optimization tool. And here's, in fact, this one here has some information that's already been applied, and we can see this is the object browser, or grading object browser. And if I kind of close some of these down, so you can kind of see what we're looking at here, on the right there, the smaller dialog box, you can see like building pads and pathways, ponds, and on down the line. But any one of them in particular, if they don't have a number next to it, there's not going to be anything in it. Okay, so in fact, we were talking like the grading limit. There's one. Well, that makes sense. And if I move some of these things out of the way for a second, so you can kind of see what's going down. Okay, but kind of neat too, because wherever you're at with this thing, you can go into these. You can right click on them, zoom to them. Now, when I clicked on it, you'll see that it pulled up a properties for that grading limit. Okay, and in any one of these, it's when you assign it. This is where you would go in and you would say, okay, this is what the name of it is, and looking at this one, just kind of going down top to bottom here. What do we have here? Anything turned on particular? Oh, I don't actually. Let's see, grading limit. Depth of material, 0. Let's see, is there anything in here that probably was the best one to pick? But balance, cut, and fill. You can see that I just scanned this down a little bit. It was condensed. But you'll see that there's these little buttons where this is where we can turn different things on and off. And that's part of that iteration process too. Once you run that optimization, if you don't like how something looks, we'll see like a color. There's different ways to display it. We'll actually do it here in a minute. And anyway, when you fire it up and it's going through its iterations, you'll see it's quite colorful, and then it's going to come back to us, and we can look at that and go, okay, what are we looking at here, and where are those problems? And you can it'll kind of highlight. Well, in fact, it will in like dark red, and you can change colors, whatever you see better. But in that dark red, it's going to anyway, it's kind of, we can go into any one of those pieces in the zones, or these individual pieces, I should say, and then from there, we can play with these values, turn certain things on or off, whatever it may be, and then rerun that process. So it doesn't, I don't know, I've been asked this a couple of times for what it's worth. Does it kick you back like 10 resolutions? No, it just keeps sending you back when you check it, and then, you make a couple changes here and there, and then you rerun that process. So here's where we would apply it, and then again, that one there, that's going to be the one that's kind of where we go in and actually, apply this information, right? Or this is the one that applies it. This one, the one above it, this is what kind of keeps track. Maybe think of like the tool space in the prospector tab. When you create things, we go to the prospector and we can find our sites for grading and whatever, or alignments, or on and on. So, and it's just keeping track of everything here, okay? And then, since we were talking zones briefly, and there's different locations, we don't change it here, but these zones that were created, and it's going to be, most likely it's going to be a closed polygon, and you can see in this case the site sidewalk and the areas, and you can zoom to any one of these. And again, the one that's on top, it's going to try to achieve that mathematical calculation first, and then it goes to the next one. And maybe another way, I'm always trying to draw some kind of parallels within the program. For those of you that utilize points and point groups, you'll know that we can go into those, create different output settings and styles, and you bounce one to the top. You may have maybe if it's on the survey side of things, it might be like survey control or calculated points for a design you've done, and then you just put those into a point group, and then you would immediately underneath that, you would set the one that says don't show the rest of them, often named like no display or something like that. So same kind of idea, but in this case, it's just calculating first and going to the next one. It does keep track of them all together, though, don't get me wrong, because it has to. But nonetheless, it's still saying, let's see if we can achieve this grade first. All right, so with the curbs and what have you, let's see, let's go to one of these. Let's right click, let's zoom to one of them here. I just happened to click on it, and I randomly zoomed in on it, and you'll see that looking at this, what it does is it highlights and makes it thick, and they've changed the colors up here. I believe the darker side is the outside of that line work, and the lighter side's the inside here. I think it'll tell us up here too. It used to be different colors. But here you can see just by selecting it, and this is the properties, it's given us the name of it so we can track it down later. It's saying the height of this thing is, you know, 1/2 foot with the width, very common. And then if need be, if it came in backwards, say, you know, that the curb's backwards, you can just say, let's reverse it, and you can see those colors. If I can zoom in on it, a little tough to see probably on your end, but you'll see how it's flipping to either side. So that's kind of cool. I'll leave that as it is. But again, this is all just pre-set up stuff that we would go in, and these are all polylines at this stage. And then you just, you know, apply it and give it these specific constraints, and then say, let's give it a go, you know, and fire it off. So that would be one. Let's see, what else we got in here? I wanted to also show, the different types of lines when you go to apply these things. And now there's a ton of them. I'm not going to go through each one of them. It's just a matter of selecting it, and as you go and you pick your polyline and you start filling out your information. But there's different, let's see, this on the palette, Civil 3D commandeered the AutoCAD palette, just like same thing with assemblies and whatnot. Where we grab either assemblies or sub-assemblies and start compiling it for our corridors. Same idea, and you'll see in mine, they're down here. If I click on here, there's 2 of them here. So looking at this one, here's lines, there's zones up here, but a lot of them in here, right? And they do, you know, very different things. Like an aligned edge, that'll create a break line, and it can be placed like on top of a drain. And when you use that, the idea is we're trying to really, you know, create a solid constraint. And then there's also ones in here. I mean, there's a ton of them in here, right? I shouldn't have said drain line. There we are. There's the drain line there. That one controls the slope and direction of your surface, so a very key one. And if I jump back to that other drawing, you would see those. I actually manually created those feature lines where I was doing a lot of copy and pasting and setting grades going forward and all that kind of stuff. And as it moves along. Now, I mentioned this earlier. But there's different terms as you go in and select these. Again, there's constraints, which we hear all the time when you're doing design, just in general. There's always some form of constraints, right? Whether it's a road or a pipe network or whatever it may be. And this is no different. However, the other term they use is an objective, and we'll poke around in one of these and see exactly what I'm talking about once we get into the actual optimization tool. And when we start poking around in that area, it kind of has a split dialog box depending on the type of line it is. And what it's going to show in there is, you know, do you want this to be a solid, you know, a key element? Do we want that to be a constraint, or do we want that to be have a little bit of flexibility? And that's where that objective aspect comes into play. Okay, and on the objective side of things, you have a slider bar where you can say, well, you know, this is kind of important, but, you know, make sure the other things are done first. And you can actually give different percentages and say, see if you can get this about 30% more accurate than you know, just trying to do it by hand. And then when that information comes back to you, if you don't like it, or it's too tight, or it's pulling weird triangles in some direction, or whatever it might be, that's where that iteration process comes back in. You would go back into each one of these little properties here and say, let's change that a little bit, or give minimum, maximum elevations to like a building pad, or not so much building pad, but a retaining wall, or, you know, whatever it is, you know. So that's a big part of it. Okay. Then you also have points. And points is a little bit different. When we're looking at points, you have 2 different types. There's a low point, and I'll show what these are at here. See if we can find them here. We have a low point, and then we have a bounded point. And the you know, kind of similar to what we were talking about with constraints and objectives. A low point would be a good example. Speaking of a low point, that would be more Oh, maybe it's a drainage in a pond, or it's a key elevation that you would put. Maybe it's in the center of a parking lot where I've done this a lot with folks where we'll place, we have basically our overall grading plan of some kind of lot, whatever it may be. And then once you go into it, you'll pick everything looks okay, but there's a specific area here or there where a catch basin needs to pull those triangles down a little bit. So we'll place a point, add it to the surface, and sometimes manually you can do it by putting some labels on it, slope labels, and raising and lowering that point. And when that surface updates, you can kind of see what we're doing, if we're getting the appropriate slopes and that kind of thing. So that's what that low point is. It's a key location somewhere that we want to hold. The flip side of it is the bounded point, and the bounded point is very similar, but that's where we go back in, like I was saying, where it's a bit objective, where we can say, and it's not quite as objective as the lines, but we can say, let's give this a range. Maybe see if you can't work this out within a foot or so. And so it'll, again, take care of all the other iterations first, and then come back to that, and hopefully close that thing out. What else do I have for you guys here? And I was actually going to go in and see if we couldn't run this optimization. So now, one other little thing for those of you that haven't dabbled with this much, a couple more things actually. We're just kind of reviewing the buttons before we actually go in and optimize it. So there's the first three ones. And it's, basically the setup and the reporting information, and we can go and make our edits. But the optimize button there, that's when we start running it, right? That's when it's going to jump out and start performing the task at hand with all of our constraints. So in fact, I might do that. But what I was going to say prior to that was this. I just want to throw one other quick little thing. This little help tool, it's kind of cool. It's actually I've had many a fun conversation with folks where they're talking about just the help files in general. If you try to, search something up, and, and you get whatever it may be that you're searching up, and you get like 10,000 hits. In this case, what's kind of cool about it is it's kind of keeping an idea, very much like the content sensitive ribbon. It sort of knows where you're at in that process, and when you click on it, it's going to suggest, okay, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do that. So and it'll walk you through those workflows. So I just wanted to point that out, because it's not like just pulling up the a random help file. If you type in points in one of the the help files, you're going to get literally hundreds of hits, and you got to search through all of those. But I'm going to go ahead and I'll turn that off for now. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit the optimize button. It does take a second. In fact, I wanted you guys to see the process here, but it's looking at all these different components that we were talking about, the different zones, the curbs, any of if there was points in here, and it's actually running the entire thing as we go here. And I'm looking for my bars here. So it's going to take everything we have. We'll cover some of these things here in a sec, but why is that not going there? Go, baby. There it goes. All right. So while that's cooking there, I'll talk about a few of these things. So for the record, if you're utilizing this, it's sort of like an external program. However, if you were to shut Civil 3D down, it also shuts down. It's not necessarily, even though it's it's independent. They're very linked together, obviously, and so this will pop up, and sometimes it's a little bit of a hassle where you got to kind of move things around a little bit and see what's going on. Now, you can see how that's starting to get all kinds of different colors jumping around. And if you look on the upper left-hand corner here, I'm actually on the optimization tab as we speak. Now, briefly, I'm just going to jump over to the object browser. And here's a listing of everything that's in there, which is very similar to what we were looking at before. It just happens to be in this program, or this part of the program anyway, and obviously with all the numbers as it's jumping through. But going back to the optimization, you can change these different colors and whatnot, but you can see max slope violations are going to be in that red. I think an earlier version, it was a different color, but minimum slope violations, this is just referring to different, just as a whole, it's just referring to if there's any problems with it as you're going through it. And it may report, sometimes the reports are benign as they come back to you. And then down below, you'll see on this, what is it? You'll see that we have like reviews needed in red, and just gives us different colors here where we can go in and start making different decisions. Now at the bottom, this is, I just grabbed this one because it was small. I forewarn you a little bit here. A big site that you may go in, plug all of this information into. This could take, that might be one of those deals where, you might be at the end of the day and say, okay, I'm going to let this thing optimize and when I come back in tomorrow, it'll be ready to go. You don't want to be watching this thing. This is so small that it ran it quick. I knew it was going to be on sort of a a time crunch as we're playing with this thing. But it looks like it did go ahead and go all the way through it, and just some maybe key elements in this thing. Down below here, we have some preferences, and when this goes to calculate, I'll show a few things off in here, but it's talking about like the quality of the surface, smoothing out the surface. We have ability to go in and customize maximum triangle lengths, minimum. I believe it's both minimum and So actually, in this case, it's just the max. So idea of that is, it depends on what kind of grading that you're doing, but we may not want this to have great big long triangles. Then you have great big flat slopes here and there. Whatever it may be. So you can turn these different things on and off. There's remove existing ground points. You just play with this as you as you run this thing. Okay. Then also in here, your visualization toolbar. I'm just turning it off and on so you can see it up at the top. We'll explore that here in a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of go across the bottom possibly first. And you can see across the top here, you can see I was going to do the bottom first, but this is just different ways to view this. Down below here, this is a little bit newer. I don't know if it was exactly like this when it very, very first came out, but we have this nice little checkpoint thing as it's going through, and you can watch it, cook basically as it goes through, and then we get to the end here. There is some. That's the one I was looking for. Our optimization options. So a few different things at the bottom there. If I click on that one, we can go in here. You can see that there's like global constraints, minimum drain, max slope. So this is everything that we can go in and preset. You can also set the number of iterations too. This is, I think, set at not the hugest number. I think I've seen some folks do, like 25,000 is a pretty solid number and big. And it just keeps grinding and grinding. Of course, that's going to take longer to do. Then down below here, here's those objectives that I was talking about, where we can plug in values with these things. Now this one, we're saying balance, cut, and fill. That's at 100%, but some of these other things, minimize earthwork or smoothing the surface, that's where we can go in and maybe trim some of the fat, if you will, or create more of a fudge factor. So all of these different things will play together. Now in this, all right, so fair enough. Cancel this for now. Now, also in here, we can take a look at our conversion charts. And what we're looking at on this one is just basically a feasibility, and you'll see this kind of bell curve thing. Why isn't it popping up here? There it goes. I don't know why. It took a second there. In the very beginning, it starts off a little rough, and that's what it's trying to mathematically calculate as it's going through this thing. And we're trying to achieve like a baseline in here. Sort of like a bell curve like thing as it shoots through. And this doesn't look too bad. However, down here we do have a notification. So if I were to click on that notification, it's just saying one or more objects is disabled because it is either particularly or fully outside of the grading. So that's one of those suggestions that they're not necessarily, it'll come back to you and say, hey, we got a problem. So this is one you could dismiss it if you wanted to. Now, looking at this thing so we can get a little bit better idea of what we've done, up top here we have some different, and the text is just kind of calling it out. We have like the results and how do we want to view those results. If I click on this, what we're looking at here is sort of I'll zoom in so you can see it a bit better. And it's just showing sort of the surface as a whole, but just to the right of it here, here's the cut and fills. And you can see how that's, and whatever it is that you switch, notice over on the left-hand side here, it's telling you exactly what we have going. So it's giving us the color ranges and all of that. It's actually kind of slick. We can see our curbs in there. Right, and then if you don't want to see any of that, that's where you just hit that this last one. That's just like, these are just basically, think of them as similar to like styles, and then it just uses a form of a color banding, and all of these can be changed, by the way. And you can see that that legend over on the right hand side is giving us those elevations there. So again, nice little niceties along the way. Now this one over on this side is pretty steep, so you know, most likely you're not going to be running into this all the time, but nonetheless, it's still this nice little analytical tools here. And then these schemes could be, if that's not something that you're into there, that's where you can go into your settings on this thing and change stuff up, visualization settings, and play with the different, you know, ranges. I think they call that oh, what do they call it? A schema, a color schema, or something like that. But big thing I would most likely do is I would do the results. That way you can go in here and say, you know, where's these problems at? And again, the dark red, that's where it's a maximum slope violation to achieve that. And you go back in and, you know, click on before, you don't want to necessarily update our drawing. That's where we go back into this thing and switch back to our optimization browser. And this is exactly how you do it. You come in here and, you know, bounce down these and, you know, click on whatever whether it's a curve here. I just grab that randomly. What else do we have in here? Something that might make a little bit more sense. So whatever it is, you just, as you click on these things and view them. Oh, by the way, another little thing on this too is it's not always necessarily a mathematical element, as far as like saying let's take this down a little bit or change an elevation. Sometimes you may just want to turn one or two of these assigned constraints off, and that's like, in particular, I just happen to pick, these are kind of important. They're the, you know, obviously the known points, but see how it's highlighting over here. These are key points. We'd want these, but if you did want to turn them off, you can see that it's got that little toggle active. So if you're in, say, another location where there's a break line or something like that, you're like, boy, that's sure pulling those contours weird. And you can just turn that off. And it's not like you lose anything, right? As far as, it's not like erasing something in the drawing. Similar to like surface properties, you go into your surface properties and you can toggle things on or off, rebuild your surface. And if you need it back, you can go right back into it and toggle it back on, rebuild it, and you're golden. So anyway, that's how we would analyze it. Now we haven't actually, you know, updated our drawing. Currently, you can see that status bar on the bottom, and it slid all the way across the bottom. That means it's complete. And then if I need to go back and make some changes, no problem. I just go, you know, make a few edits here, a few, you know, changing things around, whatever needs to be done, then I would go ahead and optimize it again. Now our themes, just clicking on these, maybe show some of these off too. Our themes are just giving us different, showing locations. There's our slopes, different aspects. So several different ways to just visually see what we've done, right? I've noticed that, like, just in Civil 3D on its own, sometimes when you're like saying, oh, and one of the object viewers, or if you don't have renders or whatever it may be, or analysis styles created, sometimes it kind of can be hard to see because it's often, you know, sort of the same color. So, you know, again, we can go into this and you know, I can say, show me just, you know, all the tin lines too, and that's kind of one of my favorites because I always want to know how things triangulate. Do I have to go in, add break lines? You know, what are the, you know, what are the components that need to be resolved? And that's huge when it comes to design, being able to see all this information. And then, you know, for what it's worth, wow, this is huge. On the hydrology side, when I turn that on, it's going to put in little arrows showing me exactly where everything's going, or it's shedding the water and that kind of thing. And, you know, again, just turning it on or off right there, nothing to it. Now, if you did like it, right, we've already ran our optimization here. If you did like what we had here, this is where you would go in and you would just say update the drawing. And I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, kick this back just so you can see one of the dialog boxes pops up. And you know, there was some flaws in that I would definitely would have gone in and you know, looked at, fixed, you know, whatever it may be. But you can see the different information that would be projecting into the back into our original drawing. You see, we're saying let's bring in one surface. One surface will be transferred to the drawing. Do I want to create a new surface? We can name it, obviously, and I'm not too worried about it now. I realize I'm up against time a bit here, but we can name it. We can go in for the style. and we can apply, whatever. And these are just pulling from this template that I'm utilizing. It would pull your styles, and we can see it with triangles or contours in 1 and 5 or half foot or whatever it is. Feature lines. If I could switch on that one real quick. Remember, when you go and select these. Originally, they're just polylines, 2D polylines, and that's and once that math is ran, that's when these become feature lines. So if you may, I don't know why you wouldn't. I'd want them. I'd turn those on. It looks like, was there 20? I can't quite make that out. 26, 28. Can't make it out. So if I project that in the feature line style, most likely they're using a basic, which makes sense. And then you can, when you're projecting that in, we're going to create new feature lines, and you can see that in this case it has a prefix too, so it helps you sort of differentiate what was created within the optimization tool or your own that you're actually going in and later defining, right? And we do have our weeding factors and so forth. And then same thing with points. We can force this to create an automatic point group, and we'll just use whatever style that they have. And when you project that in, it's going to get out of that tool. And we have a start off point. And the last thing I just want to maybe point out with this is I want to kind of jump over into the prospector just so we can see where that information is at. And while this is grinding here, I realize we're coming up on time here. I have about 10,000 more things I'd love to show you. We'll finish up about 8 o'clock tonight. Just teasing. But at the end here, I'll pull up my contact information, and you know how to get a hold of us. I believe we're all across the country now, so we can serve all your needs, whatever you need there. But I love to talk about it. I'm showing my email. Let's see if this came in first. Pop that up, and you can get a hold of us. Now, I didn't change the name. I was just trying to be expedite a little bit here, but there's that new point group. We just brought in those 2 points. Just like wherever you're at here, here's where you can simply right-click on them and zoom to them. There's one, and the other one. We still can go in and edit these or tied to that surface and so forth. Now, if I go into that surface, just kind of showing this thing off, I didn't name this one. I just wanted to make sure it came in with a completely different name. You can see it says new surface name, and under those definitions, we should, let's see, where is everybody? Might be under sites. I think it is. Did that come in? Let's see. There we are. That's the ones I was looking for. I guess it is. It actually projected those into feature lines, and the one key thing is you can see that there's that little prefix too, so we can kind of differentiate what we're creating on manually and going back in and refining these things, or what was created in that optimization tool. Okay. And there's all our layers and all the additional information as it comes in. And let's see here. So our initial one kind of looked like this, and I don't have this all. Let's see which one I'm going to grab. I'll try this one first. Just to poke around here. So there's the finished one. Whether we like it or not, I just let it go. I'll grab that other one too. Maybe I'll do it over here. Might make it a little easier. Yeah, I can see that one without it. So, and notice that it took it all the way out to that end, or that for this location. So I'm going to stop there. But like I said, pull up my contact information here. I really appreciate you allowing me to come in and invade your day and hanging out with me. This has been quite nice.